everyone, and welcome into a very special video today on the channel, where today I'm going to be talking you through my drawing process for the Lego Legend of Zelda custom set showcase, where today you're getting a sneak preview at a Wave 3 figure, and that is Sooga from Age of Calamity. Right, so clearly here I've got a couple of things to point out while we do the outline to start off with. So this is sped up footage from my drawing package that I use, which is a free program on computer called Krita, I think it's called. And basically, I chose this one because it replicated most of what I was doing before on my tablet, so I knew it would be quickest to learn so that I could get Wave 3 out on time for you guys. And I've actually updated my entire process of drawing from what I was doing on that tablet, and which was always sort of based off the likes of the big guys that draw figures, so Ash and Flash and etc. like that. But that's not important. Today I want to talk about particularly what I do. There's a couple of quirks, but mostly it's the same. But I've had a couple of people ask, so I thought I'd do one while I get to work on Wave 3 here. So the first thing I do with any character is if the character is largely similar to an existing figure or is buildable in Studio, I build the minifigure in Studio, which as you can see is what I did with Sooga here today. I built a minifigure in Studio, which is Bricklink's free digital designer program. I angled his hands and legs exactly how I wanted, set up the camera and took a print screen. I even posed his katanas exactly where I wanted them. However, later, as you'll see, obviously Sooga's going to have a specialist head mold because of the weird shape of the Yiga's heads, and the fact that that piece is new and doesn't exist in Studio means I have to use a plain minifigure head. But one other key thing is in this initial sketch model, I use different colors for every single part so that I can very clearly see what's going on, which is a big problem I used to have in my old package. I used to just import minifigures and I could not see what on earth was going on. But anyway, here you can see that the next step is using a curve tool. I go around and I use the same thickness of black lines to trace all the lines in this particular pose. And you can see here that I do the curves by making lots of little points rather than faffing with a fancy curve tool. And that sort of gets the shapes that I want. And then that will be used on the full outline. And obviously this is taking place on a separate layer to my main sketch drawing underneath. And that is purely because, well, you don't want to have to erase all of this color afterwards. So we're just sort of tracing over the outlines, getting rid of the color, getting the pose into the hand-drawn style. While we're still doing this, I thought I'd briefly address, I am looking at Mecha. I don't think I use it. I've got a couple of videos planned on Mecha. I've had sat for a while, but I think it'd be really cool if I could use Mecha. But Mecha is not suited for my purpose, and I really did not enjoy my time with the software. But you guys will get to hear my opinion on that in the future. So I think I'll just stick to hand-drawn figures for now. I think it's personally a lovely medium to take a look at, and I don't see a problem with it at all. Okay, but here we are finishing up the last couple of bits of details, because obviously as we approach the end of this hand, you'll see that we have our problem when we come to the head. Now, for the Yiga, I have decided that the closest minifigure molded head was the Guavian Death Gang from Star Wars Force Awakens, because they have a very similar head shape to the Yiga. However, it's not perfect. So this being the first or second Yiga that I've drawn means that this will be not a reuse, but I've been able to modify that head to be a Yiga head already, which I can then use on Sooga here and then readjust and modify, which is what's the great thing about drawing in a program like this, is you build up this parts catalog of different things and you can reuse at different points. So we're just finishing up with the last little bit of outline here, which is of course the second katana, as you can see on screen now, and then we will progress on to the way more interesting point of designing a figure. Well, and here that is. So you can see that I've already previously drawn in the Yiga, and that head does look indeed very similar to the Guavian Death Gang, and the simple thing I've been able to do here is I've basically just been able to import the head from that other figure, cut off, and place it at just the right size and scale, so it is about where it should be. For minifigures, you can see I'm positioning with the angle because all of my figures are drawn on the 3D axis, and obviously drawings are 2D in their nature, and then I'll just come around and I'll clean up all the edges, merging these two images together. I'm fairly happy with my head, and I think it fits the style of the showcase, so that's not a problem by any means. I know it's not absolutely perfect, but as I said, hand-drawn figures aren't perfect, and I think that's a part of things. And then obviously the other thing that needs to change for Sooga is the hair. The hair is not accurate to Sooga at all, and you can see that because this hairpiece that I've created for the Yiga in general would actually have a minifigure attachment point so that you could put the different hairstyles on and to keep the mold budget down between different characters, that I'm just replacing it, and then I'm going to add the new attachment piece based off the reference, which you can now see has appeared in the top left. So for those of you who don't know, Sooga was a character introduced in Age of Calamity, which I suppose gives you a hint about what kind of sets are coming in Wave 3. Don't worry, they're not all Age of Calamity based, and they're not all Breath of the Wild based either, but Sooga was definitely a character that I wanted to draw, and it just so happened that the set he was going to appear in ended up getting fast-tracked to Wave 3 through its variety. Anyway, back to the actual model at hand. We are adding the crevice to Sooga's mask, which is cracked in game, and you've seen me experiment on the screen with a couple of different colors. And this is one of the key processes that happens when drawing a figure: is you have to work out what sort of color you want the uh, well, just how to represent details in minifigure form. Minifigures have a very unusual proportion in terms of their real characters, and there's certain details that just don't work, like especially in a drawing package, just drawing a grey line over the side is not necessarily the best solution. But either way, we tried red, black, white and grey, and in the end I settled for that light grey which you just saw on the screen, and that actually took a long time in real life. It took me a long time to work out what I was doing. And then of course the other iconic part of Sooga's head, which we're working on now, is his plume feathers. I don't really know what you'd call them, but you can see here that I've experimented with a couple of different sizes, and generally I don't move on until I'm happy with one particular aspect, and you'll see in a minute that I've decided that's way too big. So the first one was way too small, but the second one was way too big, and I think I'm pretty sure to decide that this one's probably too small as well, although I may not bother. And basically this giant plumage was that attachment point that I talked about earlier, and then I color them in dark gray, and oops, there you go. I've bodged the layering. I haven't drawn the same layer, so there was a bit of a fill gap there, which is something that is clearly been fixed. And there you go, we have Sooga's head. And the thing I always find with these figures is that they never look brilliant halfway through, and that is just always the case, really. So you just kind of have to trust your instinct and finish the design, and then hopefully it's a good outcome, or you restart. And that's why these showcases take long, is because I fail my figures all the time. They each take about an hour and a half each, and even then that's nowhere near the amount of effort that I know some people put in. So the next thing I did was I quickly filled in the katanas because they were simple block colors that required no extra detail. And then of course we move on to the chest. And with the chest, my first goal was to try and get that shape of his V-neck, like sort of entrance to the spandex in, and I put the blocks across, and you can see I'm never going to be quite happy with a design first time. There's lots of curves to get. So these are the big frilly bits at the top, and you can see that those are starting to turn into their shapes. And again, I just want to reiterate, they just don't look good to start with, and that's just part of the design. So usually from here I'd next go to waist detail, and then I can easily fill in the gap in between. But because I was so unsure about what was going to happen with this one, I decided just to work down the torso, at least to start with. But again, I was really unhappy with the proportions to start off with, and this was a common theme with this figure. It was actually fairly challenging to do, even though I already had the head mold nice and ready. And talking briefly about the head mold again, as I said, it's a figure that's already been used that I was just able to modify, and that is just using the Yiga inverted eye. So I quite often draw over my layers, so what you've just seen me do there is removing lines from previous shapes that no longer need to be there, and then I'll add more shapes in, and then I'll remove the old ones, etc, etc. It's all very simple. So then we're going in with the flowery collar now, which is something shared between Sooga and Master Koga. And then you can see I'm preparing to move downwards now towards the belt section, which is always a nice blocker to get in, because if you decide to have the belt on the waist, or the belt on the torso, or the belt split between the half two, it gives you a nice scale of how you need to distort the rest of the features of the figure. And that's what we're working on here. And sometimes you'll see that I use the circle tool, and I use those just to help me with more rounded shapes. I didn't do it with the big central one because it was on an angle, but these second circles didn't bother me as much, or nearly as much, and they came out perfectly fine looking. So you can also see that currently I don't shrink the size of my internal details. I do for some, but for the most part I keep my brush size consistent. I think that's something that will change in the future, and I'll move away to a different size on the inside of a torso, just like official figures. But remember, at this point, I'm still learning this new program. As previously, as I said, I was drawing a different software, and that software was nowhere near as capable as this one. And I'm sure this one isn't nearly as capable as what the professionals use. But the figures are obviously only half the showcase, and while they're probably almost the part I'm most proud of, it comes down to a point where, well, I've got to move on and focus on the rest of the showcase, or else you'd never see a custom set for me. So here in comes the colors. We're using a mixture of dark gray and then two tones of red. One red, which you'll see me change in a minute, is a bit of a darker red, and one red is a slightly lighter red, but there's not really enough contrast at the moment, so I'm pretty sure I go back and change that. One key thing about minifigures is there is no side of torso, top of torso, or side of hip printing, meaning that those have to be plain, which is also going to look fairly awkward when you initially do a design, and that's something that just can't be helped really, and you've just kind of got to live with that and know that that's in the style of drawing a minifigure. And while it's unfortunate, I don't like stepping outside of what Lego would actually do, and that means that I just have to live with it. So that block of red does look a bit unnatural, but there's just nothing you can do. So instead of choosing white for his belt circles, I chose to go with a light grey, and I was particularly happy with that. And then after drawing the circles, I obviously have to add the hip line back in, because that's a line that is always visible on figures, because it's, well, how minifigures work. But that's besides the point, really. That's just a small little detail, and then you'll see me use my circle tool on the smaller discs on his belt as well. And in the end, I may or may not have... yeah, there we go. I shrunk the size of those lines in order to make them fit better, and that's just how you can get more detail in a small space. This is a really bad tutorial. I'm not really sure what we're doing here. Anyway, next up is arm detail, and you can see, there we go. Haven't changed my size back. I have now, although that size is still wrong. We're adding in the dual molded arms, and this is just a handy divider that appears on Sooga's arms, where his arms go from dark grey to light green. No, dark red to light red. Oh, I'm stumbling over my words. He's also got these arm guards on the lower portion of his arms, so we can see that represented on this model here. You can also see the dark red patches, as well as the brown circles at the top of his arms, where there would be more detailing on a normal figure. We're back adding dark red to the legs now, and you'll see in a minute I have to obviously add the side of leg detail, as that is something that minifigures do indeed have. Trying to recenter, just being a bit awkward there. And then it's time for front of leg detail, which is something I fairly often struggle with because the legs are almost always at different angles. But I can definitely see the improvement since I started drawing in this package, and I suppose that's all that really matters. I'm still very impressed with what this package can do, and while it's not perfect, or my figures are not perfect, that is just it. So anyway, I'm pleased with that. So we're just finishing up that last bit of detailing. You can see I'm adding those dark red patches to his legs, and obviously part of that one on the left leg is hidden, or left leg from our perspective, because it's at an angle and you can't see it fully. And you can see that yet again I did the wrong colors. That seems to be a repeating pattern. And then just got to come down to our foot printing, and then we'll be finished with this figure. And yeah, no one asked for this. A couple of people, I suppose, did. They kind of wanted to see how I drew my figures, and it's about as chaotic as you'd expect from me, really. Anyway, I hope someone got something useful out of this. The program I use is called Krita. It's a free program. I found it online. It probably won't be the best for you, so I don't know if I'd recommend it, but I don't know if I'd recommend it fully. Mainly just because I chose this program just to suit my situation and what I was doing before and where I knew I was going with the showcase. So as we add Sooga's abs here by copy and pasting, yeah, I guess that's my final thoughts. I do all my figures on a unique template called Empty Template Canvas, because it's set up to be the right size so that my particular brush sizes work for me every time, so I don't have to think about it every single time, and so that all of my figures aren't as pixelated as they used to be. And then I save as and export and undo all that fun stuff. But we just got to tilt in the abs here so they actually look like they're on an angle. And you can clearly see that there's some centering issues with this figure where the abs and the belt line up, but the center of his torso doesn't. But, you know, that's all the little quirks of being an amateur hand-drawn artist. I'm not actually that good at art, to be honest. This is something very new to me, which probably explains a lot. But as we finish up today, I wish you a good rest of your week. Consider subscribing for more Legend of Zelda content, and goodbye.